Hey there, average Joes. Welcome back to the Eternal Struggle. I am your average bowl cut, JayMang. Today I'm joined by my taller than average bowl cut, tall Shark and bowl cut handsome. How are you today, Shark?
Oh, I'm exhausted. Had a long day at work, but I am excited to talk about Eternal. I didn't really get a whole lot of Eternal in this past weekend, but the entire week beforehand I did. How about you? How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. My area of the country got hit by some pretty devastating tornadoes last night, and
Oh shit!
they missed my area by roughly 5 miles. So
Oh, you're
I'm
fine.
very grateful for my family not having to go through what some of the families a little north of me are going through right now.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
So I know that you already touched a little bit on you not really playing a whole lot of Eternal, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your week in Eternal?
So, the this past week I've been just crushing from 800 rank 800. Well, okay, so let me start from last week's episode. Last week's episode, we showed you guys a whole bunch of cool deck lists. I actually took the Praxis tokens list that we showed you last week, and I went from rank 800 in Masters to rank like 200 in Masters, which is pretty awesome, I would say. It's a crazy grind to go through normally, but I was just doing really, really well. But then this past weekend, I went back to my hometown in upstate New York, which is like a 6 hour drive. And then I got very drunk and vomited for 4 hours when I could have been playing Eternal. So I didn't play this whole weekend. I didn't see anything about the Masters Challenge until, today. And even then, today I was, at work building a set. So I didn't really have any, downtime to read about what happened. So you're going to have to tell me all about it here, Jay. How about you? How was your week in Eternal?
So I've actually my interest in Eternal has definitely been reignited, which I'm glad that it finally came back around. I know that some viewers are probably getting tired of me talking about how very little I had played Eternal, but Set Six being in full stride now, even though I have a few of my complaints, fuck Palace. Um, I've overall been enjoying the set. There's a lot of really neat things. I've been playing a lot more. I haven't hit Masters yet, but I mean, I haven't really tried the last few months. So this is the first month in a while that I've actually like been working towards it. With my little amount of time that I get to play, though, it's kind of hard if I don't do it like really early in the month. But I finally gave in on playing the fun decks, and I'm just trying to hit Masters before the end of the month. And then my plan next month is to grind real hard at the beginning of the month to get Masters so that I don't have to worry about it. So the last couple days, I've been playing a lot of Stone Scar mid range, which is still very good deck. Null Blade is I underrated that card a lot early on in the set. The card's really good. Like it actually is surprising how many strategies, especially like in the current meta, that it hoses.
Oh, for
So
sure.
yeah, it's great. It's good. It's pretty good against Horu control, which is very like good in itself. But it also like just has what's the word? Not situ. Well, some situational hate. Let's just say it has some situational hate against things like Reanimator. I actually won a
Yeah.
game because of No Blade against Reanimator when I had no business winning that game otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, it knocks out like a whole bunch of anything that has to do with Scream, which, is very near and dear to my heart.
I also streamed 3 times this past week.
What?
So, yeah, I've been finding myself streaming a little bit more often when I get the opportunity for two reasons. Number one, recently, not a whole lot of streamers that I enjoy watching have been streaming. So, if I'm in the mood to play Eternal and I plan on playing it for like a few hours or whatever, and nobody that I enjoy watching stream is streaming, I'll just stream myself. So I like
That's
there
cool.
were 3 nights in a row where nobody like that I really watched was streaming. Like it was there's like I can't remember their name, but there's somebody that I don't know if they're new or I just haven't been paying attention. But there's been like a guy that's been getting like 300, 400 viewers, like the top viewed streamer every night. He plays draft. It's not man and mouse or anything like that, but like I'd never seen him
Never heard of them.
before. I tried to watch him, didn't really care for it, so I just started streaming. So keep an eye out for me streaming. Like I've been doing it a little bit. I'm trying to um, take the game a little bit more seriously again. I finally came to terms with, like I said earlier, I think I just need to like play good decks that I know that I do well with to grind out masters, and then once I hit masters, I can play some of the more cool, fun decks.
Yeah, that's what I did this month. I think I made it on like day 10 of May. I made it to Masters, and then I was just playing like fun stuff for a little while.
Yeah, that's my plan. Like, right now, there's not much incentive to go for top 100 other than getting your name printed on the Wall of Fame or whatever for the month. So I think my goal next month is hit Masters early on and then play a bunch of these really cool, fun decks that have popped up in the format.
For sure.
All right, guys. So let's talk a little bit. I want to quickly go over the topics that we have for this week. So we're going to start off with the Masters Challenge. We're going to talk about the top 8 decks. We're going to talk about the top 64 breakdown, and then like we'll mention the challenge bug that happened, and then we're going to briefly cover the new promo, which I had completely skipped over last week. It had recently come out last week when we had recorded, but we already had such a full show. And then for our last topic, we're going to have kind of an open discussion about we're going to give the state of Dark Frontier. So state of the meta, which I think is probably going to end up becoming a recurring thing for every set or campaign that comes out after it's been out for a little bit and it seems like the dust has settled. We're going to talk about the top decks, a little bit of what's happening underneath the top decks, and our opinions on the meta and if whether or not we think it needs adjustments or if we think it's healthy. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, so let's move right into the Masters Challenge. So the top 8 was had a little bit of diversity, although you can't really say that because half the top 8 was Horu decks, but this was won by Eric 9099.
Yes, fellow The Great Parliament member. Congratulations, Eric. Good job.
Yes, big congratulations, Eric. And he was on Horu Control. So the biggest takeaway from his list is it's playing a handful of cards that haven't really been seeing a whole lot of play in this archetype or just recently started seeing play in the archetype. So the first one is the Svetya's Sanctum. I think we all knew that the deck was heading in this direction.
That card is bonkers.
Yeah, it's very good. It's playing 2 Martyr's Chains, which is one more than it had been playing before, which makes sense if you're playing Sanctums.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sorry. And then Pristine Light is the last card that I wanted to mention, and then I'll let you take away your thoughts. But Pristine Light actually hasn't been seeing a whole lot of play in the list.
Yeah, I actually picked it up today for the first time on my lunch break, and I won like 2 or 3 rounds in a row with this list. It's really cool. Martyr's Chains doubling all of your Svetya's Sanctum tokens is awesome. Getting multiple Svetya's Sanctums is awesome. I think one of my favorite things to do is swing in with all of my Svetya's Sanctum tokens, let them all die, then Pristine Light and get them all back, and I have more, dudes to play. An additional thing that I actually got matched up against the exact mirror, because I know this because I the person went to their market, got their Scourge of the Frostholm and played it against me, but then I just played a land and killed it with the Martyr's Chains and won. But the game this deck has a lot of game against pretty much any deck, even itself, like even its own deck.
Yeah, this deck is really scary. So I think I would be less scared about this deck existing in the meta if Pristine Light wasn't in it. And the reason I say that is because I've actually, as a person who's been playing a lot of Stone Scar, the Sanctums are actually like hurt your matchup against Stone Scar because it slows down how you answer what Stone Scar is doing. So I actually think that the best thing for Stone Scar was the addition of the Sanctums, but this list is playing a lot of board wipes. I mean, you've got the 4 Harsh Rules, the 3 Pristine Lights, which are, I mean, like they're board wipes to a degree, and then you've got, for the other half of things, you've got the 3 Hailstorms for your more aggressive decks. So this deck is no longer really leans on Palace, which I think hurts some certain matchups for sure. Because Palace, I think, was one of the biggest reasons that this deck um, operated so well because it could just dirtle all day until you play one random dork and then play a Palace on him. So um,
Yeah.
I think this style of deck works a lot better in the hands of a very skilled pilot like Eric versus like any random Joe playing it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the decks that had like like three Palace main, one in the market would be better for just like any random person. But this is definitely you have to think through your turns a little bit more. I found like just one of my favorite things to do in this deck is to play Svetch's Sanctum, then next turn play Honor the Clause, where you draw 3, discard a Privilege of Rank, and you make a 4/4 and a 3/3
Yeah,
because you
that's pretty
cast Privilege
gross.
of Rank too. Is really gross. And then you hold up 1 or 2 power for either Defiance or Ice Bolt or whatever, and you're just golden.
Yeah, this is definitely the style of deck that I enjoy to play, but like from a philosophical standpoint, like I cannot bring myself to play this deck because even though I enjoy playing this style of deck, I think that the way that the meta is shaped right now with Palace being a thing, I like can't bring myself to play cards that I think shouldn't exist. so
That's fair. I mean, I
so
usually can't bring myself to play the number one played deck. I just wanted to try this out for a couple of rounds just because I'd seen Eric been posting about it in our team chat and he won with it, so I wanted to test it out. But
yeah, if I had the pristine lights, I would probably try and give it a spin. But as of right now, I think my next craft will be Tokas. But anyways, we spent quite a while on Eric's deck. Let's move on to the second place deck, which is a very surprising original isomorphic build Reanimator. This is literally the same 75 from the original list.
yeah, this list has no new cards in main or market. This deck is really powerful and it shows.
Yes.
Love this deck.
It's I mean, there's not really much to say here. It's an older list that I mean doesn't really obviously didn't suffer too much from not adding any new cards. I still think it's kind of weird that he is not playing, or they, I don't know, Relwyn is who the pilot was. I still think it's very interesting that they didn't at least play Honor of Claws, because I thought that that was probably one of the best cards to add to this deck.
That's true, but they may not have the campaign for it.
Okay, you have a good point there. It's very possible as a player that like walked away from playing the game around this time and just doesn't have any of the new cards. And if that be the case, they came back and they really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Good job, Roland.
Yeah, very, very good. And congratulations, because Eric had already won the invite to Worlds. So Relwyn got the invite. So the last match didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, funny thing to note that Eric 9099, he has won both of these Masters challenges where there's no actual money on the line, but all that you win is packs or the first place into Worlds. But because he already won it, he didn't need to win it again. I just think it's funny that he won both of those when there's no money on the line.
Yeah, no, I actually like give him props, because wanting to play for the glory of it. I mean, like, if you enjoy playing the game, more power to you.
Yeah, man, for sure.
So moving on to third and fourth. So in third/fourth place, one of the lists piloted by Winterus is a Stone Scar mid-range list. It's pretty close to the typical list that we've been seeing around. I think the biggest difference is that they added a last chance and an additional annihilate, and I'm actually not quite sure what the cuts they made were, but I know that in the list that I've been running, I am still on the 2 null blades, and then I added, oh, you know what, they cut the other discard spell, the one that hits sites and units, treachery. They cut the treacheries for a last chance and an additional annihilate. So they're on 4 shakedown, no treacheries, which is fine, because like treachery is probably the first cut that I would make if I wanted to make any cuts from the deck, which I've been thinking about making the cut for an additional null blade, because that card is just so good. Like when it's good, it's good. When it's not good, it's still all right.
That's fair. That makes sense.
Yeah. The only downside is when you've got like Desecrate Null Blade, like you have to play your Desecrate first.
Yeah, that's rough, and because otherwise the Null Blade will just die.
Yeah, I learned that one the hard way because I didn't like kind of like think about it and like sequenced incorrectly. But I still ended up winning that game, so I didn't get punished for playing like a fucking bowl cut. They're also playing the Combust in the market, which I think is criminally underrated. It's a very, very good strategy.
Oh yeah, a one cost removal spell in the market that, I mean, you just throw away whatever, maybe your Marchant or a Argentport Instigator or Black Hole War Leader that's useless now.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that for the lethal swing.
Sure, yeah.
And then the other third, fourth place was Dark Revenger playing a version of Howling Peak Genev. They have a couple of interesting picks in here. They're playing 2 Swift Refusal, which is negate an enemy spell that isn't fast, so like board wipes. They're also playing the Hailstorms.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, I'm looking at their market. They've got 2 banners and a Mullah and Nikova. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, they're definitely playing the more go big Genev Peaks decks where they want to make sure that they hit all of their power drops every single turn.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But this is neat. Like I am glad. Like I'm not too surprised that Genev seems to continue to stick around, just because like that's just how powerful Display of Instinct and Ice Bolt are. I think they're just so versatile.
And Peak.
Yeah, and Peak. Like Peak is still a very good card, but I truly think the staying power comes from Display of Instinct and like cards like Heart of the Bolt.
Oh yeah, yep, definitely. Really good, really cool decks.
All right, so let's move on to 5th through 8th. So the first deck we're going to talk about is Hammer Time playing a new version of the Praxis Pledge deck. So this is a market list version, which I believe was a more recent change to the list. I think the last time I watched Sunny's stream, he was talking about how he felt like the deck didn't need a market anymore because of the addition of Tokus. And then like I mean they got Praxis Insignia as well, so like it's just a very, very streamlined deck. There's not really a whole lot to say here. This is definitely a deck that I would like to try out, but I got to make those Tokuses, and I actually don't have any Darias either.
Or that Nika, or I don't have any Darias myself either. I do have Tokus though.
But yeah, so
this deck looks cool.
Yeah, it looks really neat. I'm interested. Like the Nika is interesting since they're only playing the 3 Heart of the Vault. I think I'm pretty sure that the argument about cutting Heart of the Vault's been made before, but like Heart of the Vault just seems like
it's so good,
an automatic 4 of in any deck that can actually handle playing it. Which this is literally Praxis. It should be able to.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so moving on to the next deck, and these next 3 decks are going to look very similar. So.
Well, 2 of them are.
Yeah, 2 of them are. So the first one is we're going to talk about Etgold on Horu or Huru, however you want to pronounce it, flyers. So this is a deck that I've actually been like once I got really, really frustrated with Palace being a card. I finally was just like, you know what? I made the Sadides and I tried out this deck, and the deck is very, very powerful. But very often I find myself losing to Power Screw in this deck. Like it happens really often, like way too often.
That's weird. Yeah, this deck is interesting. I don't really like Kothon in it, but I'm not sure what else I would put in there instead.
Yeah, the Kothon is interesting. Like I found that every time that I played Kothon, he just kind of like ate a removal spell, which is like I suppose fine because then that's one less removal spell to hit my Hojin or my pacifiers. Or
I feel like I'd want Ikaria there instead, right? Well, I guess Ikaria opens you up to any one damage removal spell, but so does Hojin, kind of.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's actually not a bad idea because I think the deck is definitely hurting for power issues. At least from my experience.
Yeah, getting up to quintuple justice is pretty tough for Siditi.
It's happened a couple times where I didn't I somehow like end up hitting the primal sigil or I need the Primal Sigil, and I can't play my Acidity on 5. But I mean, like, it is what it is. The deck is very, very powerful. It kind of, I don't want to be hyperbolic and say that it plays itself, but it kind of is like pretty much just like a you play on curve type of deck. And I feel like you have to mulligan any hand that doesn't have at least 3 power in it.
Yeah, I mean, the deck only runs 2 fast spells. One of them is Levitate, the other one is Finest Hour. Everything else, you just play your dude, pass the turn. Play your dude, pass the turn. It's pretty simple. It's a great deck. It's got Palace. Fuck Palace. But
yeah, fuck Palace. But anyway, so let's move on to the next one, which M. Gallop also played a Huru control, and it's literally the same 75 as Eric's.
Yeah, yep. This deck, we've already covered it. It's awesome. Interesting to see 2 copies of it in top 8.
Yeah, I am led to believe that Gallop may have tested with Eric, or unless this list was public before the event went live.
I don't know. It's possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that, like, I know that Sanctum had started seeing play, but I did not think that Pristine Light was very common in these lists.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's possible that they met each other on the ladder and for the other one's list. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. And then the last list is another Huru Fires, which is, again, the same 75 as the previous one. So
yeah, I think there's just a swap of power. This one is running 9 Justice Sigils, the other one's running 8 and an extra Huru banner. Or yeah, something like that. I don't know.
So outside of Huru being half of the top 8, kind of diverse, I guess. I mean, at this point we have
decks. There's 2 different Huru decks, so they're 2 decks. They're just the same colors. That's, I mean,
yeah, you are correct in saying that. Like, and it is important to make that distinction that the decks are different because they are playing quite different game plans.
Yeah, you can even see if you just look at the Masters ranked top 8. You know, the list of all the decks. It's got the curve listing right there on them, and the top deck, the winning deck, like goes up at 3, then down, then back up at 5, and then has a couple like high end stuff. Whereas the Huru aggro deck like is very, very big and then very flat at the rest of it.
Yeah, definitely. They are both very powerful decks that are seeing a lot of play in the meta for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's move on to the top 64 breakdown. I'm just going to read off this list, and if you have any comments, go ahead and blurt them out. So the most represented list in the top 64 was Stone Scar Midrange with 16 copies.
What? That's insane. That is a quarter of the meta was Stone Scar Midrange.
Yes, that was a lot of the meta, but I will have to say I'm not too surprised because I think that Stone Scar is the quote-unquote safe choice.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's pretty easy to pilot. It's fine. It's got lots of removal. It's got really strong threats. It's interesting that I don't know. Like in the past, we've had top 64 breakdowns where it's like half of the entire meta is this one deck, and it's kind of cool to see that only a quarter of the meta is one deck.
Yeah, definitely a lot more healthier of a signal, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
So the second most represented deck was Huru Flyers, which had 9 copies. And then I'll go ahead, and the third was Huru Control with 8 copies. So if we were to try and put those two together, Huru, even though we realized that they're 2 different decks, Huru made up 1 more than the Stone Scar deck made up. So we had 17 Huru decks.
Well, there's also a Stone Scar aggro deck in here too, so that makes it 17 as well. But I mean, that doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah, so 17 split down the middle for Huru and Stone Scar. Not too surprising. I think
that's still not as bad as it was back when it was Huru, back when it was Genev Peaks and whatever the hell beats Genev Peaks. It was Winchest and Peaks.
Yeah, Winchest and Peaks when Peaks beat Winchest and Winchest beat everything else.
Yeah, and together they were like 60% of the meta.
Yeah. So I'm going to start going a little bit quicker through the rest of this list. So we had 6 copies of Praxis Pledge. 4 copies of Combre mid-range, which is a little bit surprising because I actually don't see a whole lot of that on ladder.
Yeah, that wasn't on my
Um,
radar.
you got 4 copies of Skycrag aggro, which makes sense because aggro is what it is. 3 copies of Reanimator, one of which was our good friend The Rock.
Nice.
Uh, 2 copies of Classic Genev, which did put one of those two into the top 8. 2 copies of Classic Winchest, so it is still out there. People are still playing it.
Okay.
2 copies of Ricano Aggro, which is a deck that I haven't really hasn't been on my radar in a while.
Well, a lot of people have been playing the new promo card, which we'll get to later, but there's been a lot of Ricano with that.
Yeah, I think this is more classic Ricano Aggro because I don't think that 4 copies of that Oni were out by the time the event started. I think there
That
was
makes
only
sense.
1 or 2. And then 1 copy of Chainbray, 1 copy of Even Hour. That's a really neat deck. I'm actually we're gonna come back to Even Hour here in a second. 1 copy of Even Catcher Combo, which is something that we had covered last week. 1 copy of Phone Control because there always is. 1 copy of Phone Scream.
Cool.
1 copy of Praxis Tokens. 1 copy of Rats. It says Relic Tokens, but it's Rats. And then 1 copy of Stone Scar Aggro. So real quick,
That's
I want to
cool.
come back to that Even Hour list. Have you seen that?
I have not.
So I believe that this was Isomorphic who came up with this list, and it is if I recall correctly, a fawn-colored, even-handed golem list that tops out with dark shit. What is that card called that makes the 4 horsemen?
The Witching Hour?
Witching Hour. Yeah, Jesus. I wanted to say Darkest Hour, but I know that that's a player's name / band.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's a really cool looking deck, and if I had the Witching Hours, I'd definitely check it out. We're not going to go into the deck list, but definitely go and look it up because I know that it's posted on Eternal Warcry.
Oh yeah, yep. And we can possibly find a link to it or something. I don't know.
So, do you have any comments on the top 64, sir?
I think it's really healthy. I think it's really diverse. I don't particularly think it is representative of the entire the ranked ladder, but I think it's cool to see that it's not 60% 2 decks. It's 30% 2 decks at the highest, which is awesome.
Yeah, I believe that of this top 64, something like only 250, 300 people actually played their games that were qualified. So, I think that a lot of these people chose safe decks, and the top 3 represented decks, we can even go down to the top 4 represented decks, are pretty safe choices. So I'm not too surprised with our results.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I guess it's not that interesting that 700 people over the course of the past X however many months made it to top 100, and some of them may not have known that this was going on. Some of them may not have been available. Some of them just may have stopped playing. Some of them, who knows?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it seemed like they had such a low turnout because I believe you read somewhere that it was like 700 people qualified.
I believe so, yeah.
And only like 250, 300 of them actually played in this. It
Yeah.
seems really weird for me when like first place means you go to Worlds and probably like could win a lot of money. So,
Well, it could also be that this tournament was not for money, so people were
that's true.
just like, meh.
That's a very good point. So the last thing I wanted to go over with the Masters Challenge is there was a bug where I know at least 2 players in the top 64 could not choose the deck that they were playing and were pretty much forced to play with a pre-con deck. And Direwolf didn't rewind it. They didn't go back and fix it. And I may be working with outdated information at this point, but if these players weren't compensated, I have a real problem with that.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. So you're saying that they tried to join the game that they were supposed to join. and it wouldn't let them choose their deck. It only let them choose a pre-constructed deck.
Yeah, they were forced into playing a pre-constructed deck. So this happened to the first round opponent to the boxer, and he had made a post on Reddit about it. And I guess in the waivers that they signed for these events, there is a clause for as is. So that would save Direwolf Digital in the case something like this happened. So that player was forced to play their precon deck as is because of that clause, because I guess Direwolf Digital either A, couldn't rewind, B, wouldn't rewind, C, are bowl cuts. I don't know. But like that it if true, at least two players got fucked out of any chance of winning this event.
That's true. That's really insane. Yeah. I'm looking at the Reddit right now. The boxer posted a link to it. It's just called Ranked Masters Challenge Bug. And there's a couple of updates as well. RNG explained that a possible reason for this happening being that my opponent did not click join match before the timer runs out.
Yeah, but he also in the second update mentions that the opponent did say that they had joined in time.
Oh.
So I don't like I guess the point I'm trying to make is if I had day two'd this event after like let's go all the way back to the beginning. This player made top 100 of Masters 1 month, possibly multiple months. They qualified for this event. Then they played their games with the deck of their choosing and qualified for top 64. And then you're going into day two playing top 64, and in your first round you don't get to play the deck that you want to play, and then you lose because of it. That would piss me off enough to never play this game again.
Gotcha.
If I wasn't compensated
Yeah.
for my time and effort, because if you're telling me that I don't get the opportunity to play for my spot the way that it should be played because either A, you can't rewind, or B, you won't rewind, then like that tells me that you have no competitive integrity, and calls into question any future events where some bug like this would happen.
Gotcha. Yeah. So looking at the comment that Direwolf posted, it said, "Hi folks, we were alerted to this issue during the tournament, and we are still investigating. The tournament system does fall back to the Shadow Strike deck if it can't find the deck used during the qualifiers, and it only does this so that the next round can start synchronously. So like if they accidentally deleted that deck, or if maybe they were missing a card from that deck, like they dusted a premium or something, that could definitely be part of it. But yeah, it said we investigated immediately when we heard, but we've not found a cause yet. Unfortunately, the tournament was at a point where we weren't able to correct it mid-course. Our apologies for the confusion. We're continuing to look into this situation. We'll reach out to affected parties this coming week when we have more information." Yeah, so
Okay, well, it does sound like that they are making that effort to at least give some sort of compensation to the player. I still feel really, really sad and bad for that player because maybe they really, really like one of their goals was to make worlds. So who knows? We'll see. We'll let Direwolf handle it
yeah, for sure.
and see what they come back and let us know. We'll check back. Hopefully we'll have a response for this next week and we can follow up on it.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
All right, so let's move on to the next topic and talk about the promo that we had missed last week.
Oh baby, this thing looks really interesting. I haven't played it myself yet because I think I just got to my fourth copy when I got back home from my hometown. But I will walk you through exactly what that card is. The card name is Jishu the Burning Bush. I'm sorry, Jishu the Burning Brush. My bad. This card is a 2-cost 2/2 Oni. It costs 1 fire influence, and it says when you play another Oni, play a +1 weapon with Overwhelm on. If you've attacked this turn, meaning onslaught, you may move a weapon of your choice to the top of your deck. So you get to look through your deck, pick a weapon, and it goes to the next card in your deck. So if you have something with warp, awesome. You get to play it that turn if you want. or if you simply just want to draw a specific weapon, like Null Blade, for example, you can draw it. This card is really cool as a 2-cost 2/2 Oni Lord kind of.
Mhm.
I yeah.
It invites some really interesting deck building choices. I know that some people were talking about this possibly working well with Caleb's Sanctum. Also, just being an additional Oni that um, actually works really well with the is it Igin's site, the Rakano site, the
Yes.
workshop. It
Mhm.
works really well with that because it gives all Onis that are wielding a weapon double damage, and since this gives
Ooh,
them overwhelm.
that's true. Oh, and Caleb's Sanctum. Yeah, I just looked that up because I didn't know what that did off the top. 4-cost relic. The start of your turn, sacrifice all weapons on your units, then play a random weapon on each of those units. That feels really cool. It feels like playing a Caleb, the original Caleb. That'd
Mm,
be pretty
yeah.
cool.
So I just wanted to briefly, go over it since we had missed it last week. We had brought it up, but we didn't actually talk about it. So do you think that this is actually a pretty good promo? Because I feel like this is a reasonable enough power level. I hope that they continue to push the bar
Promo card
up
could be
with
good.
promo cards.
Yeah, like I feel like this is pretty. I wouldn't say it's the best one. I think Svechia definitely
Oh, yeah.
is up there. I feel like this could be like 2 or 3, maybe 4. I don't know, but I'd have to go back and look at the other promos. But this is definitely pretty up there. It's a cheap, aggressive Oni that helps other Onis.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do like that they are continuing to print interesting promos. The promos don't have to be like legendary level cards, but
yeah.
when they make promos like this that are very obviously like could have easily been a rare, I that makes me happy because it gives newer players a cheaper alternative to deck building. On top of the fact that if they are already currently playing the game, they get these cards for free. And
Oh
if they're
yeah.
not, promos are cheaper than rares to craft.
Mhm.
So, I as long as they aren't making extremely busted like promos, then I mean I'm happy. I'm even happy with them printing like legendary power level type promos if they really really wanted to. But I know that that tends to take the steam out of certain legendary cards, and they don't want to discourage players from playing certain legendaries.
Well, I'm looking up a list of all the promo cards, and there's a handful of them that are definitely legendary feel. Like Yushkov was probably a rare. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know how to say this. The bear from last month.
Oh, Maknadi.
Yeah, that's probably legendary feel.
Yeah,
That's a legendary
Maknadi,
card.
you have a really good point. Yeah, Maknadi is definitely like a very legendary feeling type card. It is a true top end finisher.
And Kyphus.
Yeah, Kyphus. Yeah, no, okay. So I take it back. There are definitely legendary level promos, and I hope they continue to print them. They don't have to all be zingers, but like a card like this, like people love their Onis. Like it's an enabler. Like I'm happy to see them continuing to print cards like this, and then like just cards that like push weird and different boundaries. I would love to see like if even-handed golem was a promo, I would be so giddy because even-handed golem was one of those cards that we looked at when it was printed and we're just like, oh, this card's such a fucking meme, but it has spawned
It
so
is
many
so good.
really cool decks that are really fun and play on a really interesting axis.
Hold that thought because I have a really cool deck list of the week for you here,
Okay.
which kind of goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about here.
All right, we'll
Um,
come back to that then.
yeah.
Let's move on to the final topic so that we can get to that. So the final topic is we're going to give our state of the meta. So this is going to be something that I think that we'll continue to do every time we get like a major release after the dust has settled and the meta has become more defined. I think we're finally at that point for this meta. And first off, I wanted to give a huge thank you to Isochron, who had not too long ago brought back and regularly started releasing the Meta Mondays. I think that it like kind of stopped getting produced at one point, but I'm glad that he brought them back, and I want to give him a huge shout out. Go check out every Monday. Go check out his post where he pulls from a handful of well-known and very good Eternal players what their thoughts are on as far as like what the tiers are laid out for the meta, and we're going to use this post as kind of our guideline for our discussion that we're going to have as far as the state of the meta.
Yeah, for sure. It's really cool. He pulls a bunch of people who just all input the data of who they were playing against, and then they just crunch the numbers there and find the number of people who are playing these decks, like the percent of people who are playing these decks, and put them at different tiers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's break right into it. So the tier 1 level consists of 3 decks, and it should be no surprise to anybody what these 3 decks are, and that is Huru Control, Huru Midrange, and Stone Scar quote-unquote aggro mid. I think it's a little bit more on the mid-range side nowadays than the aggro side, but I can understand why we continue to call it aggro mid, because it does have some very, very aggressive hands.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think about what we were talking about in the top 64 breakdown, Stone Scar was top was 16 out of the 64 decks, and Huru Control plus Huru Midrange was 17 out of the 64 decks. So that's pretty cool to see.
Yep. All right, so let's break this down by deck. So Huru Control is the first deck that I wanted to discuss. We already talked a little bit about what the deck list entails, although there are currently what I would consider 2 versions of the deck. The older version, which was the non-Sanctum version, is fallen out of favor. So let's call that Palace version, because the current version has replaced the Palaces outside of the one that they play in the market with the Sanctums. So as far as I'm concerned, I care a little, like I dislike the Palace version a lot more than I do the Sanctum version. I think that the Sanctum version is actually playing a little bit of a quote unquote like fairer game. I know that that may be kind of a controversial statement, because just because of the deck that I have been playing, because like for me on Stone Scar, I think Stone Scar is probably the fairest of fair decks that exist right now that are played consistently. I believe that I have a lot more game plan against somebody that's trying to play the Sanctums and then just go wide on me. But as far as I'm concerned, and this is something obviously I've been kind of memeing about it the last couple weeks, but I think that Palace is a card. Like, I think the issue that I really have with Palace is it existing as a good control finisher versus being a good mid-range card. The fact that it's so easy for a control deck to play a 2/2 with Aegis, so like the merchant or whatever, and then withstand it, and now they have both a threat and a way to protect everything that they have on board. Something about that interaction bothers me a lot in its existence, and and like even in the mid-range decks, I truly think that the endurance clause is my biggest issue with the Palace as a card.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean it pops any of your permafrosts, it pops any, stun effects, that kind of thing. And it makes it so that your opponent can both attack and block with all of their, big units, which is pretty much all Control's going to be playing, right?
Yeah, and it also gives the unit Aegis. So it does a lot of different things at the same time. And the fact that it's so easy to take advantage of that with such a low unit count is another reason why its existence bothers me. It's less bothersome to me as like the Sanctum lists, because now they're down to the one Palace, so not really leaning on Palace as much, because like the old list, like let's face it dude, the old list very rarely won without sticking a Palace. That was like their condition, like their win condition, and the Sanctum lists rely on that a lot less.
Yeah, which is really strange to me. Well, I guess it isn't strange, because with Sanctum you have a 5 cost do nothing, in your deck. You play it for 5, it does nothing. It doesn't wipe the board, it doesn't remove something, which is kind of what you want to be doing every turn, or drawing cards.
Mhm.
But if you're also playing Palace, you get to do something. But if you don't have a dude on board, then it does really little. Costs 6 to draw 2 cards. So I can see why they wouldn't want to have both the 5 cost do nothing and the 6 cost do little in the same, in the same list. But as a market card, when you have the time to play the Palace, you can go get it if you want to.
Mm. Yeah. So, just to finish my whole like argument about why I dislike Palace as a card, I think the biggest like the real takeaway from like the reason I don't like Palace is that Palace punishes pretty much any deck that doesn't have Vara in it, because you are forced into a situation where you have fast speed removal, which most of the time is annihilate. So if they're playing 2-color units, like dual faction units or whatever, multicolored units, you don't really have a very easy way to deal with this other than either aggroing them out or going super wide, which isn't always like very easy to do against these decks that are stacking board wipes. So I just think it does a little bit too much. The card is very, very, very strong, and I think that it could still be strong with a slight nerf. That's just my opinion. I very much dislike when decks like Huru Control make up the majority of the meta. I do see it quite often, and I'm kind of like, again, happy that they're going to these Sanctum lists, because the Sanctum lists are a lot easier for the Stone Scar decks to overrun.
Yeah, and I mean now they're running 5 merchants, so they're running 4 Genev and one of the new ones. So they can't actually run the Palace if they want to run 5 merchants.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
so and then for the Huru mid range, because so as far as Huru Control goes, I really don't like seeing it as the most played deck, because it makes for pretty unfun Eternal for the player on the other side trying to do a lot of strategies that don't involve cards that are either hyper aggressive or hyper resilient.
I do feel like there's definitely a cyclical pattern where we have a control list at the top, everyone gets mad about it. Then we get an aggro deck at the top, everyone gets mad about it. Then we get a mid-range deck, everyone gets mad about it. Then we get a control deck, and it kind of just like cycles from there.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I definitely. I mean, I'm sure there's videos of me out there complaining about FJS when it was at top. I would have to look back to some of our old episodes, but I just
sure
like
wouldn't have to look very far.
Palace is just not a very good feel good card, and I think that that's why I don't care for Huru Control, because I actually when the set first came out, I was playing Huru Control with the palaces and everything, and I don't know, like it just got so big that I just didn't really want to play it anymore. Let's move on from Huru Control anyways. So Huru Midrange is the next one that I want to tackle, and the deck is just one of those it's one of those decks that it like has extremely powerful draws and then really lukewarm draws.
Yeah.
I don't
but those
really
powerful draws.
Yeah, they're very, very hard to counter. I think that the biggest takeaway from this deck actually is this deck, I'm less worried about Palace being a card and more worried about Siditi doing very, very powerful things. I think that Siditi is very, very strong. Don't know if I think that it is too strong, though. It is a very, very powerful card. I think that it's an extremely safe craft, because I would not be shocked if it saw a nerf at some point. But whether or not it deserves a nerf right now, I think I'm going to disagree.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine as is, because you have to have 5 justice, which is huge. You have to be in a state where you can attack, and then you have to be in a state where your opponent isn't going to deal damage to you.
Yes. I do think that it's a very powerful effect, forcing your opponent to try to keep you from drawing cards, though.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
So it does some very powerful things. Overall, I am okay with the deck existing. I don't think that there's anything super wrong with the deck existing. I think it's very powerful, but I think because it's susceptible to the variants that it's susceptible to, that I'm okay with its existence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last tier 1 deck, real quick, Stone Scar aggro mid slash mid, whatever you want to call it. It's just a very, this is kind of, I would compare this to FJS in the sense of it's a good mid-range deck, but this one's a lot lower to the ground than the FJS decks were. I mean, I'm biased.
Dare I say it's aggressive?
Yeah, it is.
Aggro mid.
It is a little aggressive. I may be biased, but I don't see anything wrong with this deck. It just takes advantage of the cards that are willed to it. I think it does, like, the having options such as the discard, like Shakedown and Treachery, and then like having the utility of a card like Null Blade alongside all your usual suspects in Stone Scar. It's not very surprising that this deck popped up. It is technically, I know that it's viewed to be kind of weak to the Huru decks, but it's kind of like FJS and like Genève, like that whole cycle where like Stone Scar is like really good against the broad meta, and then like Huru Control and mid range, while still being pretty good against the broad meta, are like kind of specifically designed to deal with the Stone Scar decks.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of removal in the control one anyway.
Yeah. So, do you have any opinions on Stone Scar existing? Like, do you think that
not really? I played a bunch of that last season. I enjoyed it. This was before the actually, I think it was just after the buffs to Cha-Cha and Instigator.
Okay, so let's move on from tier 1. We're going to go through the rest of these decks a little bit quicker because these are decks that you're going to see, but either maybe aren't powerful enough in the current meta. Like maybe we can come up with like some possible buffs, because I know that Direwolf does like to buff cards every once in a while. So if we happen to think of anything that might need a buff, let's go ahead and start off with Skycrag aggro. This is a mainstay in the meta and has been for a very long time. This is probably an answer to the Huru control decks being a thing that exists. And I mean, Skycrag aggro has to exist to help keep these decks in check.
Yeah. Yep. You need an aggressive. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. You know, aggro usually beats control. Control usually beats mid range. Mid range usually beats.
Yeah. And that cycle just keeps going round and round. I don't really have any complaints or concerns about Skycrag. I think that it's at the right power level. I don't really think that there's anything that's necessarily holding it back, or that it is promotes unhealthy or unfun gameplay, other than the fact that it's an aggro deck. But aggro decks exist and they're going to exist, and Skycrag is the more resilient version of the aggro decks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we've also got the Praxis mid-range in there.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen in my time of running Praxis tokens, I've seen a lot of Praxis mid-range, and it's really just a coin flip on who gets who goes wider or who goes bigger faster. You know, so it's that deck is really scary running. You know, Heart of the Vaults, Stone Start, Titan. What does it stand for? Sandstorm Titan. God,
yeah, so I think that we should, like, they say Praxis mid-range here. I think that what they're really talking about is Pledge. I think that the Pledge deck is the new de facto mid-range Praxis deck.
I actually haven't seen any Praxis Pledge.
Really?
On the ladder.
The only Praxis I've been seeing is Pledge.
That's funny, because I've been playing tokens and I've been seeing Praxis mid-range, like classic mid-range with Heart of the Vault and stuff. Not Pledge.
The list that their link goes to is Pledge.
Yeah, that's funny.
I think they're talking about Pledge. Yeah, I haven't seen like a legitimate Praxis mid-range deck in a long time. I don't have any issues with the Pledge deck. I think that similar to the Huru mid-range deck. It has extremely nutty draws. I think it's a little bit more consistent than the Huru deck, but maybe doesn't do quite as busted things as the Huru mid-range deck can do. Um, so I mean, like I don't see anything really wrong. I'm very happy to see alternatives in the meta to playing merchants, which the current versions of the Praxis decks are going sans merchants. They're just not playing merchants at all. So it always makes me happy to see strategies being born that are good, that don't require a market.
Yeah, for sure.
So a lot of these next lists are what are considered tier 2. So you're going to see a little bit of it. So you got Felon Control, Rakano mid-range, Rakano aggro, Genev Peaks, even Xenon, and Ixchen Sites, which is a list that I haven't really seen a whole lot of. But going back to Felon Control, I think Felon Control is just a mainstay. It gained a lot with the set, so Felon Control got the insignias, which are a humongous boon to these two-color decks like Praxis, Huru, Felon. I think we're seeing a little bit of a pattern here. So like a lot of the two faction decks that have been popping up have gotten insignias, which may be a huge indicator as to like the power level of these insignias have been adding to the meta. So Felon Control, that's mostly the majority of what it has gained with this new set, other than the fact that it now has a smuggler and Rost. So I mean, I'm happy to see Felon Control continuing to be a playable list. I don't really have any concerns. I think that Rost is about the right power level for a deck like Felon. It was seeing a lot of play in the Huru Control list at first. It was actually my first craft, but unfortunately, it just didn't really make the cut in that list.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all of these lists are, pretty middle of the pack. Rakano mid-range, Rakano aggro, you're going to see a whole bunch of just people trying to crush through to masters. Genev Peaks, still really solid, good against the rest of the field. Even Xenon, that's been pretty relatively new. I think that's pretty cool with the Katra and Razor Quill combo inside it.
Yeah, some of them are actually just mid-range lists.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like they're playing like Vara's Sikalis teachers. They're even playing
this is an aggressive deck.
Yeah, like Sand Warrior.
Holy cow. Cabal Repeater. I've never even seen that card. 2 cost 3/2, pay 3 and twist it to give your other units +1/+0 and deadly this turn. Man, this is an aggressive Xenon aggro deck.
Yeah, so going back to the whole like Direwolf making cards that encourage not playing with the market, even-handed Golem, again, another card that encourages you to not play with the market. I'm glad to see these cards getting printed, and I actually think that because they've been making these moves towards making markets less of a choice, that like the game is slowly getting to a point where it's a lot healthier and you're not playing the same type of patterns across decks.
Yeah, exactly. And choosing a market 12 times during a game is going to just take I don't know. What I found really cool, I did recognize Ixten Sites. I had never heard it called Ixten Sites because it literally just runs Palace. But it was the Vargo Harsh Rule deck, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so
it's just
control,
I would probably say.
Control. Yeah, so that deck is, it is what it is. It's
I think it's a little outdated. I haven't seen it much, but
yeah. So I think that's enough talk about like specific decks. I think let's talk overarching like cards inside the meta. Even-handed Golem. Well, that is so. I guess my main takeaway from my state of like the current meta is that even-handed Golem's seeing a hell of a lot more play than we expected.
Yep.
It's producing some really cool, fun decks. Ixchen Palace is seeing an extraordinarily large amount of play, and in my opinion, could call for a nerf. I don't know about you.
I think it's okay. The I don't know. I know that you're like staunchly against it. I think it's all right as long as you have some way of dealing. And there's a lot of people playing snowballs and Vara's favors right now, which can pop the Aegis, and then any removal spell will take it out the unit.
Yeah,
Pretty
I
much.
guess you're correct there. There's definitely counterplay to it. I just
Yeah,
hate like it's such a humongous tempo swing as a
it
card.
is if you let it be.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I'm quick to judge. I still think that like I think my main change would be like the endurance clause or withstand being super powerful. Um,
I think what we should do before calling for nerfs is I think we should try to play around the card more. Like find a way to beat this card. And I mean,
yeah, I get
rather than
that.
just being like, I don't like the way that this is playing, making me play the game. I don't like that I can't play my favorite deck. Change that card. Like that's not. I don't think that's healthy for the game.
Okay.
Does
Well,
that make sense?
the way you put that makes you're making me sound like like a big crybaby about it. But
Well,
like
you
I
are a bulk.
think okay, yeah, I am a bit of a bowl cut, and like I'm not like I don't think that I'm being a crybaby about this particular card. I just think that the way that the decks that are taking the most advantage of the card, especially like I mean, like we can argue that Ixchan's maybe not playing taking advantage of it quite as much as it should, but like some of these decks are playing like I mean, you play a Genève Merchant, and you usually aren't wanting to spend your removal on something like that, or like your opponent plays Sanctum. They play a unit into a Sanctum into a Palace, but like what if your best answer to their unit is you're holding on to the annihilate. You've got one annihilate and they target your merchant. Like it's sometimes not very easy to play around. I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
Um
no, I totally get that. I just think that maybe making some deck tweaks before thinking about nerfs would be more fruitful, at least for your mental well being
yeah,
of that kind
I mean I have added more annihilates to my lists.
of.
Which is true. Like that is the additional annihilates are part of a testament towards playing around Palace. I also on turn 5, if they have a unit in board, like I have with Genève Merchants, I'll like try to bait a block. If they don't block, depending on the board state, that typically can signal whether or not they have a Palace. It's just like I don't know. I don't care for the card. I
I
think that
get you.
I think I have made that very very clear. I don't think that the card needs a huge adjustment, but like something I feel like something should be tweaked minorly to make the card a little less of such a fucking dick punch
Hmm.
in a lot of board states. Like people will be like, well, what about when there's nothing on the board? And it's like, yeah, okay, we can talk about like the best case scenario for me, but let's talk about the worst case scenario. What if they have two Aegis threats on board, and I've got Vara's favor and fucking annihilate, but then both of them are two faction cards. Like it's just like we can talk in circles about this all day
Yeah,
long. So
it's all right though. I mean, like I can see your point. Hopefully you can see my point as well. But yeah, I do think Palace is super strong right now. It's really popular because it's relatively new. And I'm sure that we will see it cycle out of the top deck. I'm sure that we'll see other decks rise to power. I'm sure that the next deck is going to be equally as annoying.
yeah, and that's true because we don't see outside of the Genève deck, we don't really see peaks a whole lot anymore, and that was
Yeah.
the best card in its meta. So,
Mhm.
okay, so I guess the state of the meta overall, other than my reservations about palaces, I actually think the meta is great right now. It's
I agree.
there's a lot of really cool decks. I think that you made a really good point earlier about how like it doesn't really matter what's on top, people are going to complain about it. including myself, obviously, since I'm complaining about Palace a lot lately. But I think that even though I have my reservations about Palace and I see Palace a lot, I can take a step back and realize and say that I think that the meta is good right now. I think the game's very, very enjoyable right now, which I think a testament to that is the fact that I've been playing it a whole lot lately versus how much I was playing it the last couple months. And I hope that like anybody that is not playing a whole lot can at least take that moment to step back and realize that even though that they may have some issues with certain cards in the meta like I do, that they can like kind of push back that past that and still enjoy the game.
For sure. Yeah, not every deck, not every game that you're going to play is going to be against the same two decks, which is awesome.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so let's move on from that. State of Dark Frontier. It's enjoyable, even though I have my issues.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the average brew and brewskis of the week. So let's go ahead and start with the brewskis, and then we'll move into the brew. So why don't you tell us about your brewski?
My brewski is Bear Republic Through the Haze IPA. I'm a big fan of IPAs. This is a California beer. It was really good. It's got it's got grapefruit and tropical fruit aromas to set the stage for a huge citrus amount in there. I don't know. It's really good. I dug it.
Yeah, I do.
Much better than last week.
I do love the citrus IPAs. I believe that my brewski of the week is something that I have brought before, but just in case I didn't. So this week I brought 50 West, which is another Cincinnati brewery. Their Punch You in the Eye PA.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one before. So
it is a double IPA. This is one of my go-tos. So this is a double IPA that happens to not be a seasonal, as far as I know. It's kind of expensive, which pretty much all double IPAs are, but it's I mean it's a very, very solid double IPA. Whatever you're expecting from it, it's that. Like it is the proverbial double IPA to me.
Cool. Now that we've got the brewskis out of the way, this brew of the week, so cool. I was for like probably 10 minutes. I was at my computer this morning, just before I had to go downstairs and start building a set. And I got to just check and see. Oh, I saw Bassoon Buffoon was streaming Hearthstone. That's weird. Then I saw Yottabyte,
unfortunately,
was playing this list. This list is it includes both Even-Handed Golem and Jishu. So we're kind of coming full circle here. It is Jishu Scream. So it runs it runs Ankle Cutter as an Oni, Bladekin Apprentice as an Oni, the 1/1 first, the 1/1 quick draw that gets +1/+0 when it attacks. It's got Dusk Raider, Even-Handed Golem. It's got Jishu as an Oni, Oni Forge Master as an Oni, and Kyojin, the Grand Shugo, kind of the whenever one of your Onis hits the opponent, you make another Oni. It's also running some weapons in there. It's got Haunting Scream's Last Chance because they can't have Dark Return. It's got Ice Bolt for removal. It was previously running Annihilate for removal, and it's also running Torrential Downpour and Clutchmate. Clutchmate is an interesting choice. It costs 4 for basically copy one of your units. If it's a dinosaur, give both of them +1/+1. However, it used to run Sudden Schism, but he was having trouble with the double blue clause of that, so he just dropped it down to Clutchmate instead, which is basically the same thing, only not fast.
I went through, while you were describing the deck, I went through that thought process, and I'm like, it has to be because of the double primal cost and Sudden Schism, which makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, and I saw a turn where he had 2 Bladekin Apprentice out. One of them had the weapon from a Jishu, and the other one didn't. And he had a Clutchmate in his hand, but he's not going to copy that. He was facing down a Sandstorm Titan, and he just drew. Maybe it wasn't a Sandstorm Titan. Maybe it was I forget what it was, but it was a big unit. It was much bigger than Bladekin Apprentice. It might have been a 4/4, 5/5, something like that. And he draws a Haunting Scream. He brings back Kyojin, and then Clutchmates it, and then swings in for like 30. It was pretty cool. It's definitely interesting. It's a little more on the janky side, but I think it's really fun. And if you've got the cards for it, I would definitely suggest trying it out. Kyojin, I probably wouldn't craft Kyojin myself, but if you've already got them, give this a shot.
Yeah, for sure. This deck looks real neat, but pretty much that's what I'm going to say about any even-handed golem deck.
Oh yeah. It's really cool to see the cards that get played when you need a 4-cost or 2-cost card that only exists as a 3-cost.
Okay, so that is, I will post that down below or in the Reddit thread so that people can go check that out. And just to shout it out, Shark did make a Eternal Warcry account for the Eternal Struggle where we are going to be posting every deck list we have covered in the deck of the week. Not necessarily that we cover, but the
I'll
brew
do what
of
I
the
can,
week.
but
Yeah, I'm not going to put you through all that trouble because we cover a lot of deck lists on here. So let's go ahead and move on to our sign-offs. This has been, we're running a little long tonight, I think.
I'm running a little long all the time.
Oh my God. Shark, where can they find you?
Oh, they can find me on Discord. They can find me in the men's bathroom. They can find me on Twitch as TallSharkandHandsome. You can find me in Eternal as TallSharkandHandsome plus 4960. On Reddit as TallSharkandHandsome, where I'm now a mod. And on Twitter at @SharkandTall, because TallSharkandHandsome wouldn't fit. How about you, Jay? Where do they find you?
So you can find me on Shark or BB's Discord. I have my own Discord. You're more than welcome to join. It's not super active, but I do have it advertised on my Twitch channel, which is JayOSU. I have been streaming a lot more often. I'm trying to stream at least once a week right now. It's kind of a toss-up whether or not I'm playing Magic or Eternal, though. Recently it's been Eternal, but that's because I'm actually in the process of getting rid of a very expensive Magic card to turn it into a Moto collection.
Ooh,
yeah, a Guru Forest.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, I won it in a raffle for $6 and it's worth $400 now, so I'm gonna turn it into a deck. A legacy deck. So and then you can find me on Eternal, JayMang plus 8035, Reddit, JayOSU, and then you can find me on Twitter at JayOSU, where I never post. So if you guys have any questions or topic suggestions, please let us know topic suggestions. I think we have next week lined up as far as what we're going to talk about. There's some concepts that are kind of hard to articulate without somebody pointing them out. And I was listening to a podcast today called Humans of Magic. I've mentioned it before on here. And they were talking with Marshall Sutcliffe, who, if you play Magic, you probably already know who I'm talking about. But he is a well-known commentator and also happens to be the host with LSV on Limited Resources.
Cool.
Yeah, and he brought up some really interesting concepts as far as like evaluation for cards that I would like for us to cover next week. So we'll talk about that. And then I also want to let everybody know that the following week I will not be recording. And I don't think that Shark will be finding somebody to record with. So we'll probably have to take a week off because I'll be on vacation.
Yeah, Big Daddy Jay has all the back end stuff for doing that. I do not.
Yeah. So, and then very lastly, I want to say that I appreciate all you guys that are sticking around and listening, and it makes me very happy to see that we get pretty regular following for the show, and which is a lot more than I expected, because honestly, I didn't really think that anybody would really care about like my opinions or what I wanted to talk about with these cards.
Same here.
And I do appreciate it. It helps make this passion project a lot more worth it when I see that people are enjoying it. So this was episode 15 of The Eternal Struggle, and stay average.
God, we've been struggling for 15 weeks.